Today we will explore one of the most mysterious and strange characters in the Bible, Melchizedek. Although his appearance in the Bible is only mentioned briefly, he leaves a deep and mysterious mark. Melchizedek first appeared millennia ago before the birth of Jesus, and his reappearance in later parts of the Bible only adds to the mystery surrounding him. As both king and priest, he is the only biblical example of combining these two important roles, something that is not often seen in Jewish culture and other religions. Melchizedek's appearance not only highlights his role in blessing Abraham, but also opens up a new vision of an eternal priesthood, not limited by time or space. An interesting question is whether he lived longer than Methuselah, who was known to have lived 969 years. The answer remains an unsolved mystery in the Bible. Today we will study together and discover everything the Bible says about this special character, Melchizedek. Abraham fought not only with weapons, but also with great faith. And this is a lesson for us. Are we willing to fight for what God has promised us? Leave a comment saying, "I trust God," if your heart is strong in Him and you are ready to walk in great faith. Melchizedek, whose name means King of Righteousness, or My Righteous King, occupies a unique place in the Bible, transcending the usual models of religious and political leaders. Melchizedek does not fit into established stereotypes, and it is this uniqueness that makes him so fascinating and important in understanding the faith. As we delve deeper into the biblical narrative, we discover that references to Melchizedek are scattered like gems throughout biblical history, each revealing a particular aspect of his mystical image. In ancient times, some 2 millennia before the birth of Jesus, a mysterious figure appears in the Bible named Melchizedek. His first appearance is in a context of conflict, challenge, and triumph. Melchizedek, king and priest of Salem, is a unique and prominent figure in the Bible, noted not only for his divine role, but also for his unique appearance unlike any other in history. The story begins in a tumultuous period of ancient history where war and conflict were inevitable. One of the most notable battles of this period was between the kings of the League and the 5 kings of the Dead Sea. It was a tense and bloody battle, but what makes it special is the reason why Abraham, the father of the Israelite nation, joined the fight. Abraham was no ordinary warrior, but a man chosen by God, and it was his righteousness and faith that made him a model for all believers to come. Abraham's purpose in engaging in this battle was not a struggle for power or territory, but to rescue his nephew Lot, who had been captured in a war between cities and kingdoms. Lot, Abraham's nephew, lived in Sodom, a city near the Dead Sea, that was famous for its luxury, but also a symbol of sin and depravity. These cities were attacked by kings of other nations, and Lot, as a resident of this city, was taken captive along with many others. When Abraham heard of the capture, he did not hesitate to set out to rescue his nephew. This was an act of courage and showed his boundless love for his family, even though Lot had chosen to live in a city that Abraham did not support. The battle was fought between kingdoms in the ancient Near East, where power and influence were determined by battles and alliances. The allied kings defeated the 5 kings of the Dead Sea, occupying it and inflicting heavy losses. However, Lot and his captives remained in enemy hands. Abraham, though he had withdrawn from the previous kingdom, conflicts could not stand idly by while his nephew was in danger. He assembled an army of 318 loyal servants and followers and set out to rescue Lot. This was a small army compared to the mighty alliance of the enemy, but none of Abraham's army felt afraid. They were ready to fight for the noble cause of saving a life. Abraham's journey was not easy. After realizing that his nephew Lot was in danger, held hostage in the war between kingdoms, Abraham decided to embark on a difficult journey to save his nephew. This was a small army, no match for the powerful alliances of kingdoms he faced, but their strength came not from numbers, but from their determination and absolute trust in God. Abraham's journey was an arduous one through dry lands, dusty deserts, and dark deserted valleys. The lands he traveled through were not only extremely difficult, but also dangerous where life seemed fragile. The harsh conditions of nature were only part of the challenges Abraham and his army faced. In addition, he had to face fierce enemies, powerful and ruthless warriors who were not only intent on winning, but also on destroying all who dared to confront them. They refused to accept defeat, and these enemies knew that if Abraham failed, all hope of saving Lot would be lost. Yet in the most difficult moments when everything seemed insurmountable, Abraham did not waver. the hardships and challenges only strengthened his resilience. Even when faced with powerful enemies and difficult situations, Abraham did not waver because he knew that perseverance and faith in God would guide him through any challenge. God was always by his side, giving him strength in times of despair. Remember, when we put our trust in God, he will never abandon us. Comment Amen if you believe that God will guide you through any challenge in life. Deep in his heart, he knew that he was not fighting for a personal cause, but for a greater cause to save his nephew, part of the promise God had made to his family. His love for Lot, his desire to protect his loved ones, was the driving force that kept him moving forward, despite all the difficulties. Every time he was tired, every time he felt discouraged, Abraham found strength in his faith. He felt the presence of God like a light shining in the darkness. It was a strong faith, an unwavering faith, that God would never abandon him in the most difficult moments. Abraham and his army finally caught up with the enemy at the city of Dan, a city located in the north of the land. This is where the fierce confrontation between the two sides took place. Abraham's army did not have much advantage in numbers, but his ingenuity and smart strategy helped him overcome all difficulties. Abraham divided his army into small groups and attacked the enemy by surprise during the night when their guard was down. With courage and skill, he defeated the kings of the Dead Sea and rescued Lot along with the other captives. It is noteworthy that throughout this battle, Abraham fought not only with the power of weapons, but also with the power of faith. For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the powers of this dark world, and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms. Ephesians 6:12. He fought not for his own sake, but for God's protection of his family and loved ones. Every strike he made, every tactic he used was carried with a strong faith in God, who guided him through the arduous journey. After the victory, Abraham returned home in triumph. However, his victory was not just a personal feat, but a victory of faith, perseverance, and love. Abraham not only saved Lot, but also demonstrated that with faith in God, nothing is impossible. Every victory he achieved was a testament to God's presence and power in his life. Journey was not only a physical journey, but also a spiritual journey. It was a testament to perseverance, love, and unwavering faith. In every step, in every challenge, Abraham felt God's guidance, and that was the source of strength that helped him overcome all difficulties, leading him to victory. This story is not only about a man winning a battle, but also about the power of faith, love, and unconditional dedication to what matters most in life. Finally, after many days of fierce fighting, Abraham and his army caught up with the enemy near Dan. The final battle took place on a tense, shouting night. With clever strategy, Abraham divided his army into small groups and attacked suddenly in the dead of night, a sophisticated and risky tactic. Abraham's army was victorious, the enemy was defeated, and Lot and the other captives were freed. Abraham's courage and wisdom in this battle highlighted his leadership qualities and his love for his family. After winning, Abraham returned to his army in triumph. But this victory was not only his personal joy, but also a great joy for all the people in the community he led. Abraham not only saved Lot, but also saved faith and hope for his family and loved ones. The battle was not only a physical redemption, but also a symbol of spiritual salvation, because through this victory, Abraham realized that all he had was a gift from God, and this victory was a demonstration of his power and protection. Abraham and his army returned home feeling triumphant, but also humbled. He did not boast about his victory, but instead recognized that it was God who had intervened and helped him. It was God who had guided him and helped him overcome seemingly insurmountable odds. After winning the victory, Abraham learned that the victory was not the result of his own strength, but rather the intervention and guidance of God. Like him, when we trust and rely on God, He will always guide us through all the challenges in life. If you feel encouraged by this story, don't forget to like and share this video to spread the faith. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on great lessons from the Bible. Upon his return, Abraham offered a tenth of the spoils to Melchizedek, the priest of the Most High God, as a gesture of gratitude and respect to God. This battle not only helped Abraham save Lot, but also highlighted a profound aspect of his journey of faith. This is a testament to the care and sacrifice not only for family, but also for the ideal of living in faith in God. This battle, although only a physical one, reflects a deep spiritual battle, a battle to protect the sacred values that Abraham believed in. Looking at Abraham's victory, we see not just a man who won a battle, but a leader filled with faith, humility, and love. His actions are not just steps in history, but lessons in faith, perseverance, and service to God. This battle is an example of how one can overcome not only external enemies, but also internal challenges when one trusts in God and acts according to His guidance. After a resounding victory as darkness falls, and the battle-weary warriors return, the fresh air of the oak forests of Mamre fills the quiet scene. Abraham's tents were built simply as a sign of peace in the vastness of nature. His army, after fighting bravely and suffering, returned to this place with a sense of victory. The victors, though joyful, had in their hearts not only joy, but also the tranquility of a firm faith in God. While Abraham and his army were resting, a survivor of the war came to him. His feet treading lightly on the damp grass of the forest, he brought urgent and important news, something that would change the whole picture of Abraham's life. In 2 Corinthians 5:7, it is also written, "For we live by faith, not by sight." As he approached Abraham, his face haggard with fatigue, the man opened his mouth and spoke of the appearance of a mysterious figure, one Abraham had never heard of before: Melchizedek, king and priest of Salem. Melchizedek was no ordinary figure. He was a figure outside the usual patterns of history, unlike any other figure Abraham had encountered. The story of Melchizedek does not contain many details about his origins, genealogy, or lineage. However, this mystery adds to the appeal and power of this character. Melchizedek appears as someone from another world where power is not based on blood or family heritage, but on the power of God. He was a perfect combination of both kingship and priesthood, something that had never been seen before in the history of other peoples. When Melchizedek appeared before Abraham, he carried a majestic and powerful presence. Wearing the robes of a priest along with a crown, he was not only a king, but also a representative of the Most High God. He holds bread and wine in his hands, symbols of communion between man and God. Bread and wine are not just physical food, but they have a deeper meaning. Bread symbolizes life and nourishment, while wine symbolizes joy and holiness. Melchizedek's appearance is not just a casual encounter, but a sacred connection where God, through him, blesses Abraham and his followers. Abraham's first glimpse of Melchizedek was not simply one of wonder at a man with regal bearing, but of a perception of a power greater than any he had ever encountered. Melchizedek was neither a priest in the Levitical system, nor a king ruling over vast lands, but he was a unique combination of both roles, and this made him a model of God's holiness and justice. Every action he took, from his friendly gesture of blessing Abraham to his offering of bread and wine, conveyed a profound message about the bond between God and man. Abraham, despite being a strong, courageous, and influential man, did not hesitate to offer Melchizedek a tenth of all the spoils he had taken from the battle. Giving him a tithe was a way for Abraham to show his respect, gratitude, and submission to God, who had guided and protected him throughout his arduous journey. The relationship between Melchizedek and Abraham was not simply a meeting between two historical men, but a deep spiritual connection. Melchizedek not only blessed Abraham, but also helped him realize his noble mission. It was at this moment that Abraham understood that victory was not the result of human strength alone, but the result of divine intervention. God had protected him and his army, and through Melchizedek, God had directly blessed him, strengthening his faith and purpose in life. The appearance of Melchizedek gave Abraham and everyone around him a new perspective on faith and humility. He was not a king in the conventional sense, but a king of divine order, a representative of God not limited by social prejudices or the distinction between religion and politics. Melchizedek is a living example of how God can use anyone, anywhere to accomplish his great plan without having to follow the rules and norms of this world. Abraham learned from Melchizedek not only about strength in battle, but also about humility in worship and devotion. With the coming of Melchizedek, not only is there a change in Abraham's life, but the beginning of a sacred tradition that transcends all boundaries of time and space. We do not simply see one man blessing another, but we see a wonderful model of the eternal priesthood that through Jesus, God will later fulfill his plan of redemption for all mankind. Melchizedek came to Abraham in an unforgettable moment. Even though Abraham was a famous and powerful man, the future father of the nation of Israel, he did not hesitate to kneel and offer Melchizedek a tenth of everything he had. Melchizedek was not simply a king or a priest, but he was a strange figure in biblical history. He had no genealogy, no beginning or end, and was therefore not bound by any rules or lineage. His appearance was strongly symbolic, for he was the model of an eternal priesthood unconstrained by the conventional norms of contemporary society. His image as priest-king was an inseparable combination of earthly and heavenly power, an image that would have been impossible in later Jewish culture. Melchizedek's ministry foreshadowed a time when priesthood and kingship would be united in the Messiah, who according to Christian belief is Jesus. For it is declared you are a priest forever in the order of Melchizedek. Hebrews 7:17. The relationship between Melchizedek and Abraham, between king and patriarch, is not simply a meeting between two historical men, but a meeting between two worlds, the world of man and the world of God. Melchizedek is not only a priest who represents the Most High God, but also a model of the great and eternal priesthood that will be fulfilled in Jesus. This event became a milestone in the history of human redemption, for through it Jesus was identified as the eternal priest of the order of Melchizedek, a divine succession independent of lineage or heritage. The relationship between Melchizedek and Abraham also reflects the profound connection between humans and God. This event is not only a meeting between two men of historical importance, but also a lesson in humility, trust in God, and gratitude for the blessings that God has bestowed upon him. Although Abraham was the father of the Israelites, a man of power and influence, he chose to submit to and honor Melchizedek, thereby acknowledging the spiritual power and blessings that he represented. This is a lesson in faith, humility, and openness to the truths that God wants to reveal. With the appearance of Melchizedek, we see not only a mysterious figure in history, but also part of the great plan of redemption that God set forth before the creation of the world. He is a model for Jesus, who will come later to carry out the work of redemption for humanity through his sacrifice and eternal life. Melchizedek is not just a figure from the past, but a symbol of a future where God's power will be fully manifested in the union of kingship and priesthood between God and humanity. The encounter between Melchizedek and Abraham is not only an event in history, but also a profound lesson about how we as believers must live and face God. We are invited not only to receive blessings, but also to offer our lives to God as a living sacrifice, as Abraham himself did when he gave his tithe to Melchizedek. This story is a reminder to honor and acknowledge God's power in every aspect of life. Amidst the rustling of the trees and the quiet air, disturbed by the urgency of the moment, Abraham listened to the messenger's words. His eyes reflected the weight of the news that his nephew Lot had been captured in the conflict, dragged away as a prisoner, along with his possessions and family. This news awakened in Abraham an immense anger, an inner fire that compelled him to act immediately. He rallies his men and sets out on a rescue mission that will take him beyond familiar borders, beyond all limits of fear and hesitation. With 318 soldiers trained by his own family, he sets out north in the hope of finding his nephew alive. As night fell, as Abraham and his men approached Ra north of Damascus under a starry sky, they launched a daring surprise attack that left their enemies in disarray in their own territory. The clash of swords and shouts of joy echoed through the night as Abraham and his men fought with courage and determination. Victory comes in the darkness of the night, the noise of battle silenced by the determination and skill of Abraham and his warriors. The enemy is defeated, the prisoners are freed, and amidst the ruins of battle, a special and transcendent encounter awaits Abraham. Abraham stands before a mysterious figure, a man who radiates an aura of authority and serenity. It is Melchizedek, king and priest of Salem, who emerges from the darkness of the night. His eyes shine with a transcendent light. Melchizedek appears unexpectedly in the biblical story without any clear genealogy or origin. He is introduced as king of Salem and priest of Almighty God. The Bible provides no information about his ancestry or how he attained this position of power. His appearance is a mystery, and his identity is an enigma beyond complete understanding. The focus of the story is the encounter between Melchizedek and Abraham after the battle in which he rescued his nephew Lot. Melchizedek is presented as a mysterious and unique figure acting as both king and priest, which makes him a fundamental figure for understanding several concepts and themes in the biblical story. Melchizedek approaches Abraham, his steps firm, his presence overwhelming the silence after the battle. In his hands are bread and wine, symbols of nourishment and communion gestures that transcend words and reach deep into the soul. Abraham, filled with reverence for this extraordinary encounter, kneels before Melchizedek, honoring the greatness of the man before him in a gesture of profound respect and reverence. Abraham received bread and wine from Melchizedek, symbols of blessing and spiritual communion. Melchizedek then raised his hands to heaven, blessing Abraham with words that echoed across time and space, words filled with divine power and meaning. He acknowledged God's blessing on Abraham, the man chosen by God for a mission that transcended the limits of human understanding. And he blessed Abram, saying, "Blessed be Abram by God, Most High, Creator of heaven and earth, and praise be to God Most High, who delivered your enemies into your hand." Then Abram gave him a tenth of everything. Genesis 14:19-20. In the context of this exchange and blessing, Abraham felt the call of gratitude and reverence in his heart. In a gesture of recognition and surrender, he offered a tenth of all the treasures he had gained in battle to Melchizedek, recognizing the spiritual power and blessing emanating from this special figure. Abraham's offering to Melchizedek was not simply an act of material generosity, but a recognition of the spiritual power and heavenly blessing that Melchizedek represented. This is a gesture of surrender and devotion, a concrete expression of Abraham's faith and trust in the divine plan unfolding before him. The theological significance of Melchizedek in this context seems to break with established norms in the biblical tradition. He is presented as an unusual figure, combining the roles of king and priest, a combination that was often separated in the religious and political practices of the time. In later Jewish culture, God forbade the kings of Israel to assume the role of priest and vice versa. Melchizedek is presented as a priest of the Lord Most High, with no direct connection to the people of Israel or the covenant that was later established with Abraham. The contrast between Melchizedek and the established order emphasizes his uniqueness and highlights his theological importance. His existence before the covenant with Abraham shows that he was not bound by the specific laws and traditions of the Hebrew people, but was the representative of God, the supreme being, to all humanity. This makes him a great and timeless figure whose priesthood transcended the boundaries of human race and culture. Additionally, Melchizedek is depicted as blessing Abraham, recognizing him as God's instrument, and giving him a great blessing after his victory in battle. The interaction between Melchizedek and Abraham highlights the spiritual power and role of the priest as an intermediary between man and God, even before the formal institution of the Levitical priesthood. A second mention of Melchizedek appears about a millennium before Jesus, further highlighting the mystery surrounding this figure. Psalm 110, one of the most quoted and interpreted psalms in the Old Testament, presents a powerful and poetic vision of Christ's reign and priesthood. In Psalm 110, King David describes a vision in which God the Most High invites another figure, also called Lord, to sit at his right hand, which symbolizes a position of supreme power and authority, emphasizing the Messiah's exaltation and authority over all things. Although the psalm does not directly mention Melchizedek, many theological scholars have interpreted this passage as an allusion to Melchizedek's priesthood, especially considering his unique role as both king and priest. In this context, the figure of Melchizedek emerges as the forerunner of the Messiah, whose priesthood and reign transcend the limits of the earth and time. Just as Melchizedek blessed Abraham and received tithes, so Christ is exalted at the right hand of the Father as high priest and eternal king, interceding for the faithful and reigning over all creation. The connection between Melchizedek and the one God invites to sit at the right hand of God in Psalm 110, highlights the theological importance of Melchizedek as a type of Christ whose image prefigures the redemptive work and glorification of Jesus. The connection and parallels between Melchizedek and Jesus as the eternal priest are among the most interesting and important issues in biblical theology, leading many scholars to study Melchizedek as a type of Christ. This approach not only emphasizes Melchizedek's uniqueness as a mystical figure in the Old Testament, but also highlights his predictive role in understanding Jesus' redemptive role. One theory links Melchizedek to other biblical figures such as Noah, Seth, and even angels based on the absence of information about his genealogy and origins. The mysterious appearance of Melchizedek without a beginning or end, recorded in the Bible, evokes transcendence and uniqueness, symbolizing the eternity of Jesus. This interpretation emphasizes Melchizedek as a prefiguration of the Messiah, whose origin and nature transcend human limitations. Furthermore, analyzing the relationship between Melchizedek and Jesus as eternal priests highlights the correspondence between their priestly offices. While Melchizedek blessed Abraham and received tithes, Jesus blesses his followers and provides salvation and constant intercession before God. Melchizedek's lack of a definite lineage and his mysterious appearances in the Bible point to an eternal life demonstrating a perfect parallel to the priesthood of Jesus. Christ transcends the limitations of time and brings about an eternal reconciliation between God and humanity. By taking Melchizedek as a type of Jesus Christ, believers are led to reflect on the depth of God's redemptive work, a work that transcends time and space, bringing forgiveness and eternal life to all who believe in him. Finally, the third mention occurs in the second half of the 1st century after the birth of Jesus, when the author of the letter to the Hebrews rediscovers the theme of Melchizedek, revealing his fundamental importance in understanding Jesus' priesthood. In this text, Melchizedek is portrayed as a unique figure, without a genealogy, without beginning or end of life, anticipating Jesus, who is the eternal priest. In the letter to the Hebrews, chapters 5-7 provide an in-depth exploration of Melchizedek's priesthood and its theological significance. Hebrews 7:17 also records, "For it is declared you are a priest forever in the order of Melchizedek." The author compares and contrasts the Levitical priesthood based on the lineage of Levi with the Melchizedek priesthood, which was introduced long before the Levitical priesthood was established. The Levitical priesthood was a sacrificial system established in ancient Jewish religion centered on the tribe of Levi, and more specifically the descendants of Aaron, Moses' brother. According to Jewish tradition, this system was established by God during the Exodus period, as recorded primarily in the books of Exodus, Leviticus, and Numbers. The Levitical priests were responsible for performing rituals and offerings in the tent of meeting and later in the Jerusalem temple, acting as intermediaries between God and the Israelites. This comparison in the letter to the Hebrews serves as a basis for highlighting the superiority and permanence of the priesthood of Jesus, who is presented as a priest in the order of Melchizedek. The author of the letter to the Hebrews argues that the priesthood of Melchizedek is superior to the Levitical priesthood for a number of reasons. First, Melchizedek blessed Abraham, the father of the Hebrew people, which indicates his spiritual power and superiority over Levi, the ancestors of the Levitical priests. Furthermore, the author emphasizes that Abraham paid tithes to Melchizedek, which suggests the spiritual power and superiority of the Melchizedek priesthood over the father of the Hebrew people. Another emphasis is on the continuity and permanence of the Melchizedek priesthood, in contrast to the temporality of the Levitical priesthood, which was bound by death and lineal succession. The author emphasizes that Jesus as a priest in the order of Melchizedek is superior to the Levitical priests because he is eternal and indestructible, not bound by death, and therefore does not need priestly succession. This theological exploration highlights the importance of the Melchizedek priesthood as a type and prefiguration of Jesus' eternal priesthood. By connecting Jesus to the Melchizedek priesthood, the author highlights the superiority and perfection of Jesus' priesthood over the Levitical system. Thus, the priesthood of Melchizedek in the letter to the Hebrews serves as a foundation for understanding the redemptive and intercessory work of Jesus, which provides eternal salvation and direct access to God for all believers. The theological significance of Melchizedek in this context seems to challenge established norms in the biblical tradition. He is presented as a special figure, combining the roles of king and priest, a combination that was often separated in the religious and political practices of the time. In later Jewish culture, God forbade the kings of Israel to assume the role of priest and vice versa. Melchizedek was a priest of the Lord Most High, which not only highlights his uniqueness, but also reinforces the fact that Melchizedek was presented as a priest of the Lord Most High, with no direct connection to the people of Israel or the covenant that was later established with Abraham. This contrast between Melchizedek and the established order highlights his uniqueness and theological importance. Melchizedek's existence before the covenant with Abraham shows that he was not bound by the specific laws and traditions of the Hebrew people, but was the representative of the Most High God to all humanity. This makes him a great and timeless figure, with his priesthood transcending human racial and cultural boundaries. Additionally, Melchizedek is depicted as blessing Abraham, recognizing him as God's instrument and giving him an important blessing after victory in battle. This interaction between Melchizedek and Abraham highlights the spiritual authority and role of the priest as mediator between man and God, even before the formal institution of the Levitical priesthood. Understanding the practical and spiritual implications of the new covenant that Jesus established based on the priesthood of Melchizedek provides insight into the relationship between God and man. By comparing the Levitical priesthood with its temporal and ritual limitations to the Melchizedek priesthood, an eternal priesthood that transcends racial and temporal boundaries, we are invited to consider the universality and eternity of God's plan of redemption. Furthermore, understanding the Melchizedek priesthood also invites us to explore more deeply the spiritual truths revealed in Jesus. Just as Melchizedek blessed Abraham and received his tithe, Jesus, as the eternal priest, blesses us and invites us to offer our lives as a living sacrifice. This reality challenges us to live in constant gratitude and surrender, recognizing God's sovereignty in every area of our lives. So we have just explored together a mysterious figure in the Bible, Melchizedek, who appeared at a pivotal moment in Abraham's life, a priest and king with an irreplaceable dual role. Melchizedek brought a profound lesson about faith communion and divine blessing. His story is not only a piece of ancient history, but also a powerful message for us today that faith is not just about praying, but also about persevering and fighting for what God has promised. When Abraham tithed to Melchizedek, he showed his gratitude and respect for God's power and blessing. And the question for you is, are you willing to give your best to God just like Abraham did? If you find this story inspiring, please share your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to share the video, and subscribe so you don't miss out on future videos where we continue our journey of discovering valuable lessons from the Bible. Thank you for taking the time to watch the video. Have a blessed day, and don't forget that God is always with you, guiding you through every challenge.
Surely, you have faced challenges that seemed impossible to overcome, right? So, what would you do if you had to fight against a mighty, numerous army that could crush you in an instant? Let's dive into the story of Gideon, an ordinary soldier, seemingly unnoticed, but who led 300 warriors to defeat the vast Midianite army. Yes, with just 300 people, no swords, no miraculous strategies, but with absolute faith in God, Gideon accomplished what seemed impossible. So, have you ever felt too small in the face of life's challenges? Let Gideon's story inspire you. Just like him, when we trust in God, He can turn the impossible into possible. This story will make you reflect on the power of faith and obedience. So, what do you think? Can we face the great challenges in life like Gideon did? Don't forget to click subscribe and turn on notifications to discover more inspiring stories from the Bible. Feel free to share your thoughts about this story in the comments below. We're looking forward to hearing from you. In ancient Israel, during the time when the judges ruled the people lived in a cycle of obedience to God, disobedience, oppression by enemies, and cried out for deliverance. It was a turbulent period marked by instability and trials. The book of Judges recounts, the Israelites did evil in the sight of the Lord, and for 7 years He gave them into the hand of Midian. Judges 6:1. The oppression by the Midianites was brutal. They invaded the land of Israel like a swarm of locusts, destroying crops and stealing livestock. God's people, once prosperous, were now hiding in caves and in the mountains, afraid for their lives and their livelihood. In the midst of this chaos, we find Gideon, an ordinary young man, but chosen by destiny for an extraordinary mission. Judges 6:11 describes the scene. The angel of the Lord came and sat under the oak in Ophrah, which belonged to Joash the Abiezrite, where his son Gideon was threshing wheat in the winepress to hide it from the Midianite. Imagine this scene. Gideon sitting in the place normally used for making wine, trying to hide some wheat to feed his family. Fear and uncertainty hung in the air like a thick fog. It was in this seemingly weak moment that something incredible happened. When the angel of the Lord appeared to Gideon, he said, "The Lord is with you, mighty warrior." Judges 6:12. Gideon must have looked around, thinking the angel was talking to someone else. His response reflected doubt and disappointment. "Pardon me, Lord, but if the Lord is with us, why has all this happened to us? Where are all his wonders that our ancestors told us about when they said, 'Did not the Lord bring us up out of Egypt?' But now the Lord has abandoned us and given us into the hand of Midian." Judges 6:13. Gideon's response echoes the feelings many of us have when facing adversity. Where is God in our suffering? Why do bad things happen if he is with us? But the angel did not come to argue theology. He came with a mission. Go in the strength you have and save Israel out of Midian's hand. Am I not sending you? Judges 6:14. Gideon, still unconvinced, tried to excuse himself. He believed he was the least in his family, and his family was the smallest in his tribe. How could he be the one chosen for such a great task? Judges 6:15. "Pardon me, Lord, but how can I save Israel? My clan is the weakest in Manasseh, and I am the least in my family." Judges 6:15-16. God's promise is clear and powerful. It does not depend on Gideon's strength, but on the presence and power of God himself. However, Gideon still had doubts and asked for a sign. He prepared an offering of goat meat and unleavened bread. The angel of the Lord then performed a miracle. With the tip of the staff in his hand, the angel of the Lord touched the meat and unleavened bread. Fire sprang up from the rock, consuming the meat and the bread, and the angel of the Lord disappeared. Judges 6:21. At that moment, God's presence came powerfully to Gideon. When Gideon realized that it was the angel of the Lord, he exclaimed, "Alas, sovereign Lord, I have seen the angel of the Lord face to face." But the Lord said to him, "Peace, do not be afraid. You are not going to die." Judges 6:2-23. That call from God was confirmed. Gideon, once a man afraid and hiding in a winepress, was chosen by God for a mission that would change the history of Israel. His transformation from a weak man to a strong leader of a nation was just beginning. Gideon built an altar to the Lord there and named it, "The Lord is Peace." Judges 6:24. That place, once a symbol of fear and scarcity, became a memorial of the life-changing encounter between a mighty God and an ordinary man. Though he had built the altar and named it, "The Lord is Peace," Gideon still felt uncertain. He needed another sign before leading Israel into battle against the Midianites. The story continues in Judges 6:36-37. Gideon said to God, "If you will save Israel by my hand as you have promised, look, I will place a fleece of wool on the threshing floor. If there is dew only on the fleece and all the ground is dry, then I will know that you will save Israel by my hand, as you said." This request from Gideon reflects his persistent hesitation. He was seeking a clear sign, something visible and tangible to confirm God's will. This mirrors human nature, which often seeks concrete proof even when faced with God's promises. Understanding Gideon's doubts serves as a powerful reminder that God often meets our weaknesses, providing the assurance we need to carry out his will. These events carry deep significance. The fleece, a product from sheep, could symbolize the people of Israel, God's flock. In the first test, when the fleece was wet while the ground remained dry, it could represent how God would bless his people amidst a barren world. In the second test, when the fleece was dry while the ground was wet, it could symbolize how God would use Israel to bless the surrounding nations. These tests with the fleece illustrate Gideon's gradual transformation from a man hiding in a winepress to someone now conversing directly with God, negotiating the terms of his faith and leadership. It's important to note that while God answered Gideon's requests, seeking signs is not the ideal standard of faith. In many other parts of the Bible, we are encouraged to trust in God's word without demanding miraculous proof. However, at this crucial moment in Israel's history, God, in his grace, chose to strengthen Gideon's faith through specific signs. If you're like me, always seeking valuable lessons from the testimonies in the Bible to reflect on and address life's challenges, don't forget to click like and subscribe to our channel. Let's learn together and trust in God to discover great solutions for our lives. Turn on notifications so you never miss a video. The test with the fleece marked a turning point in Gideon's story. His doubts were dispelled, his faith was strengthened, and he was ready to lead the Israelites against their oppressors. The man who once thought he was the least in his family would become one of Israel's greatest judges. The story of the fleece teaches us several important lessons. First, that God is patient with our doubts and is willing to provide us with the assurance we need to fulfill His will. Second, that faith often develops gradually through specific experiences with God. And third, that when God calls us to a task, He also equips us with the confidence we need to accomplish it. When the dew lifted under the rising sun, Gideon woke up as a new man. His insecurities were washed away with the dew, and in their place was fierce determination. The warrior that God had seen from the beginning finally emerged. With confirmation from God, Gideon was ready for the next step in his journey. The army needed to be gathered, and a decisive battle awaited. The man who had once challenged God with the fleece would now be tested in the heat of battle. With newfound confidence from the signs of the fleece, Gideon was ready to lead Israel against the Midianites. God's call echoed in his ears, and the time for action had come. The story brings us to a crucial moment in Israel's history, where human reason would be tested by God's wisdom. Judges 7:1 sets the scene. Gideon, also known as Jerubbaal, and all his men got up early and camped beside the spring of Harod. The camp of the Midianites was to the north of them, in the valley near Mount Moreh. Gideon, now also called Jerubbaal, after destroying the altar of Baal, had gathered a significant army. The biblical text gives us an idea of the size of this force in Judges 7:3, when he told the people that anyone who was afraid or trembling could return home and leave Mount Gilead. This verse shows that the army was positioned on Mount Gilead, preparing for battle. The people's response to this announcement was surprising. 22,000 men left, and only 10,000 remained. More than two-thirds of Gideon's army abandoned the camp, leaving only a third of the original number. For a military commander, seeing 22,000 soldiers leave on the eve of an important battle would be a shock. But God had a different plan. Instead of lamenting the loss of so many soldiers, God surprised Gideon with a shocking directive. Judges 7:4 states, "But the Lord said to Gideon, 'There are still too many men. Take them down to the water, and I will sift them for you. If I say, this one shall go with you, he shall go. But if I say, this one shall not go with you, he shall not go.'" This divine instruction challenged all military strategies. The Midianite army and their allies were a formidable force. Judges 1:12 describes the Midianites, the Amalekites, and all the peoples of the east who had settled in the valley as numerous as locusts, with camels as many as the sand on the seashore. When faced with such a vast enemy, the usual strategy would be to gather as many warriors as possible, but God had a different plan. Gideon obeyed and led the remaining 10,000 men down to the water. What happened next was a divine selection based on a strange criterion. Judges 7:5-7 tells us, "So Gideon took the men down to the water, and the Lord told him, 'Separate those who lap the water with their tongues, like a dog, from those who kneel down to drink.' 300 men lapped with their hands to their mouths, and all the rest got down on their knees to drink. The Lord said to Gideon, 'With these 300 men, I will save you. I will save you and give the Midianites into your hands, but all the others may go home.'" This strange test drastically reduced Gideon's army from 32,000 to just 300, a decrease of over 99%. To put it in perspective, it would be like a modern army of 100,000 soldiers being reduced to only 937. Human reasoning would scream that this is madness, a military disaster, but God's ways are not our ways, and His thoughts are not our thoughts. This sudden reduction had a clear purpose, which is revealed in Judges 7:2, where the Lord said to Gideon, "You have too many men for me to deliver Midian into their hands, in order that Israel may not boast against me that her own strength has saved her." God was teaching a profound lesson not only to Gideon, but to all of Israel, and to all generations to come. Victory would not come from the strength of numbers or military skill, but from the power of God. This truth would echo through the centuries and be most clearly expressed in the New Testament, where the Apostle Paul wrote in 2 Corinthians 12 verse 9, "But he said to me, 'My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness.'" The selection of 300 warriors, based on how they drank water, might seem like an arbitrary choice at first, but it could have a deeper meaning. Those who drank like dogs, maintaining vigilance, might represent the best prepared and most alert warriors. They did not let down their guard, even in a basic need like drinking water. This characteristic would be vital in the coming battle. Furthermore, the number 300 has special significance in biblical history. It was with 318 men that Abraham rescued Lot in Genesis 14, and it was also with 300 men that Samson defeated the Philistine army in Judges 15. Once again, God proves that he can accomplish great things with small numbers. Imagine the mixed feelings in the Israelite camp that night. 9,700 warriors had to return home, possibly relieved to escape the battle, but also embarrassed for not being chosen. And the 300 remaining, surely feeling a mix of honor at being chosen and fear at the seemingly impossible task ahead. For Gideon, this was the greatest test of faith he had just had strengthened. He had asked God for signs through the fleece, and God had answered. Now, God was asking Gideon to demonstrate his faith by leading a small army against a mighty force. The reduction of Gideon's army teaches us profound lessons about faith, trust, and the power of God. It reminds us that God does not need large numbers or abundant resources to accomplish his purposes. He often chooses to work through small, weak, and unlikely things to show his power and receive all the glory. This story also challenges us to trust in God, even when the circumstances seem impossible. If this testimony has awakened your heart, reminding you of yourself and of God the Almighty, please leave an amen under this video. Together we can share our faith and the miracles that God brings to his children through Jesus Christ. Let our faith become a living testimony, spreading his power and comfort to everyone. How many times have we felt inadequate or ill-equipped for the tasks God has given us? The story of Gideon reminds us that it is in these very moments that God can work most powerfully. As the 300 warriors were chosen and prepared for battle, sharpening their swords and adjusting their armor, an atmosphere of expectancy filled the camp. They knew they were about to witness something extraordinary. God, who had reduced their army, certainly had a plan for victory. The darkness covered the Israelite camp, and from afar, the campfires of the Midianite army flickered in the valley, reminding Gideon and his warriors of the seemingly impossible task ahead. But with God, the impossible becomes possible. The greatest battle for Israel was about to begin, not with the roar of thousands, but with the quiet faith of 300 warriors. With only 300 men facing an army as vast as a swarm of locusts, Gideon was confronted with a situation that seemed impossible. But God, in his infinite wisdom, had an extraordinary plan to ensure Israel's victory. The night before the battle was a pivotal moment. God, seeing Gideon's natural anxiety, opened up a special opportunity to strengthen his faith. Judges 7:9-11 records that night, the Lord spoke to Gideon, "Get up, go down against the camp, because I have given it into your hands. If you are afraid to attack, go down to the camp with your servant Purah, and listen to what they are saying. Afterward, you will be encouraged to attack the camp." This divine instruction not only showed God's understanding of human weakness, but also his willingness to strengthen Gideon's faith. Obediently, Gideon went down to the enemy camp with his servant, Purah. What happened next was nothing short of God's providence. Judges 7:13-14 describes the scene. Gideon arrived just as a man was telling his friend about a dream. "I had a dream," he said. "A round loaf of barley bread came tumbling into the Midianite camp. It struck the tent with such force that the tent overturned and collapsed." His friend responded, "This can be nothing other than the sword of Gideon, son of Joash, the Israelite. God has given the Midianite camp into his hands." The dream and its interpretation were exactly what Gideon needed to hear. The barley loaf, a common food among the poor in Israel, symbolized Gideon's unlikely army. The tent being overturned symbolized the impending defeat of the Midianites. God was showing Gideon that even the enemy unconsciously recognized the divine power at work through him. Strengthened by this experience, Gideon returned to the Israelite camp, ready to lead his small army. Judges 7:15 tells us, "When Gideon heard the dream and its interpretation, he worshipped God. He returned to the camp of Israel and called out, 'Get up! The Lord has given the Midianite camp into your hands.'" Now, with his faith strengthened, Gideon was ready to carry out the divine strategy, and it was unlike any strategy before. Judges 7:16 describes the division of the 300 men into 3 companies, each holding a trumpet and an empty jar, inside of which was a torch. Imagine this scene: 300 men, each holding a trumpet in their right hand, and a jar with a torch hidden in their left. These were not the conventional weapons one would expect from an army preparing to face a far superior force. Then, Gideon instructed his warriors, as we read in Judges 7:17-18. "Watch me," he told them. "Follow my lead. When I get to the edge of the camp, do exactly as I do. When I and all who are with me blow our trumpets, then from all around the camp blow yours and shout for the Lord and for Gideon." This strategy was simple, yet very sophisticated psychologically. The plan was to create the illusion of a much larger army by taking advantage of the darkness and the element of surprise during the night. Judges 7:19-20 describes the attack. Gideon and the 100 men with him reached the edge of the camp at the beginning of the middle watch, just after they had changed the guard. They blew their trumpets and broke the jars that were in their hands. The 3 companies blew their trumpets and broke the jars. Grasping the torches in their left hands and holding in their right hands the trumpets they were to blow, they shouted, "A sword for the Lord and for Gideon." The effect of the attack was immediate and devastating. Judges 7:21-22 reports, "Each man stood in his place around the camp, and all the Midianites ran, crying out as they fled. When the 300 trumpets sounded, the Lord caused the men throughout the camp to turn on each other with their swords. The army fled to Beth-shidda, towards Zerah, as far as the border of Abel-Meholah, near Tabath." The chaos in the Midianite camp was complete. The sudden blast of 300 trumpets, the flare of 300 torches from the darkness, and the shout, "A sword for the Lord and for Gideon," from all directions, created the illusion of a massive army attacking from every side. In their panic, the Midianites began to fight each other, unable to distinguish between friend and foe in the darkness and confusion. This divine strategy proves several important truths. First, it shows that God often uses unconventional methods to fulfill his purposes. The victorious weapon was not a sword or spear, but a trumpet, a jar, and a torch. Second, it highlights the importance of obedience. Gideon and his warriors followed God's instructions precisely, even when those instructions seemed strange or illogical. Their faithfulness was rewarded with a miraculous victory. Third, it illustrates the power of faith in action. The 300 warriors had to believe that this plan would succeed, daring to face danger as they broke their jars and revealed their positions with their torches. Finally, it demonstrates that when God is in control, even the smallest force can overcome the greatest challenges. The victory did not come from Israel's military strength, but from the power of God working through his obedient people. As the Midianite army fled in panic, Gideon and his warriors remained in position, witnessing God's miraculous intervention. The battle was won, but the pursuit of the enemy was just beginning. The Israelites, who had observed from afar, would now join in the pursuit, completing the victory that God had started miraculously. Gideon, now fully confident in God's power, led the relentless pursuit of the retreating enemy. The warriors remained in position, witnessing God's miraculous intervention. The battle was won, but the pursuit of the enemy was just beginning. The Israelites, who had observed from afar, would now join in the pursuit, completing the victory that God had started miraculously. Gideon, now fully confident in God's power, led the relentless pursuit of the retreating enemy. This phase of the campaign would reveal not only Gideon's determination, but also the internal challenges Israel would face even in victory. Judges 7:23-24 shows us how the pursuit began. The Israelites from the tribes of Naphtali, Asher, and all the tribe of Manasseh were summoned, and they went in pursuit of the Midianites. Gideon sent messengers throughout the hills of Ephraim, saying, "Come down and attack the Midianites, and seize the waters of the Jordan ahead of them, as far as Beth-bar." This call reflects Gideon's strategic leadership. He not only pursued the enemy, but also rallied additional forces to cut off the Midianite escape route. The response was immediate, as we see in the next part of verse 24. So all the Ephraimites were called out, and they seized the waters of the Jordan as far as Beth-bar. Gideon's strategy proved effective. Judges 7:25 tells us they also captured 2 Midianite leaders, Oreb and Zeb. They killed Oreb at the rock of Oreb and Zeb at the winepress of Zeb. They pursued the Midianites and brought the heads of Oreb and Zeb to Gideon, who was on the other side of the Jordan. The capture and execution of these 2 Midianite leaders was a heavy blow to the enemy. However, this victory also exposed internal tensions among the tribes of Israel. Judges 8:1 shows the beginning of this conflict. The Ephraimites said to Gideon, "Why have you treated us like this? Why didn't you call us when you went to fight Midian?" And they criticized him sharply. This reaction from the Ephraimites reflects the pride of the tribes and their desire for recognition, which often threatened the unity of Israel. They felt excluded from the glory of the initial victory, even though they had played an important role in capturing the enemy leaders. Gideon's response shows his diplomatic wisdom. Judges 8:2-3 records, "But he answered them, 'What have I accomplished compared to you? Aren't the grapes of Ephraim's harvest better than the vintage of Abiezer? God has given Oreb and Zeb, the 2 Midianite leaders, into your hands. What was I able to do compared to you?' When they heard this, their anger against him subsided. With this clever reply, Gideon calmed the Ephraimites' discontent, acknowledging their contribution and downplaying his own success. His ability to resolve these internal conflicts would be crucial in maintaining Israel's unity during and after the campaign. Meanwhile, the pursuit of the kings of Midian continued. Judges 8:4-5 gives us a sense of the intensity of the chase. Gideon and his 300 men, exhausted but still in pursuit, reached the Jordan and crossed it. He said to the men of Succoth, "Give my troops some bread. They are worn out, and I am still pursuing Zebah and Zalmunna, the kings of Midian." This request from Gideon shows the determination of his small army and the hardships they faced. They were exhausted but continued the pursuit, showing incredible dedication to their mission. However, the response from the men of Succoth was very negative. Judges 8:6 records, "But the officials of Succoth replied, 'Do you already have the hands of Zebah and Zalmunna in your possession, that we should give bread to your troops?' This refusal showed a lack of unity and trust in Gideon's ability to complete the mission. Gideon's response was stern and prophetic. Judges 8:7 tells us, "So Gideon said, 'Just for that, when the Lord has given Zebah and Zalmunna into my hand, I will tear your flesh with desert thorns and briars.'" Gideon encountered similar reception in Penuel, as we see in Judges 8:8-9. From there, he went up to Penuel and made a similar request, but they answered him just as the men of Succoth had. So he said to the men of Penuel, "When I return victorious, I will tear down this tower." These dialogues reveal the political and social complexities that Gideon faced even during his military campaign. Not all of Israel was united in supporting his mission, and some even expressed open hostility or skepticism. Despite these obstacles, Gideon and his warriors persevered in the pursuit. Judges 8:10-12 tells us the outcome of this pursuit. Zebah and Zalmunna were at Karkor with an army of about 15,000 men, all that remained of the 120,000 warriors from the eastern nations who had been defeated. Gideon launched a surprise attack on this army through the nomadic route east of Noah and Jogbehah, and he routed the army. Zebah and Zalmunna, the two kings of Midian, fled, but Gideon continued to pursue them and captured them, completely defeating the army. The capture of these kings marked a total victory. Finally, the threat from the Midianite army was over, but Gideon still had to deal with those who had refused to help him. Judges 8:13-17 describes how he fulfilled his promise to the men of Succoth and Penuel. Gideon, son of Joash, returned from the battle by the pass of Heres. He captured a young man of Succoth and questioned him. The young man wrote down for him the names of 77 officials of Succoth, the leaders of the town. Then Gideon went to the men of Succoth and said, "Here are Zebah and Zalmunna, whom you taunted me about, saying, 'You have already captured Zebah and Zalmunna. Why should we give bread to your exhausted men?'" He then captured the officials of the town and punished them with thorns and briars from the desert. He also destroyed the tower of Penuel and killed the men of the town. Gideon's actions, though perhaps seen as harsh by modern standards, demonstrate his fulfillment of his promises and the establishment of his authority as a leader of Israel. At the same time, they serve as a warning about the lack of unity and support during times of national crisis. Finally, Gideon confronted the captured Midianite kings. Judges 8:18-19 recounts this final encounter. Then he asked Zebah and Zalmunna, "What kind of men did you kill at Tabor? They looked like you, did they not?" They answered, "Each one of them was like the son of a king." Gideon replied, "They were my brothers, the sons of my mother. If you had let them live, I would not kill you." He told Jether, his oldest son, "Draw your sword and kill them." But Jether did not draw his sword because he was still a boy and was afraid. Zebah and Zalmunna said, "Come, kill us yourselves, for as the man is, so is his strength." So Gideon arose and killed them, and he took the ornaments off the necks of their camels. This final scene of the pursuit reveals many facets of Gideon's character. His determination to avenge his brothers demonstrates a sense of justice and loyalty to his family. His son Jether's hesitation and Gideon's subsequent actions show his strength and resolve as a leader. With the death of Zebah and Zalmunna, Gideon's campaign against the Midianites came to an end. Israel was freed from oppression, and Gideon became a strong and respected leader. However, the consequences of this victory and the decisions Gideon made afterward would have a lasting impact on the history of Israel, as we will see in the next chapter of his life. After the decisive victory over the Midianites, Gideon found himself in a position of great respect and power in Israel. However, his legacy would be marked by a mix of triumph and tragedy, loyalty and failure. The people, impressed with his leadership, made an unexpected proposal. Judges 8:22 tells us, "The Israelites said to Gideon, 'Rule over us, you, your son, and your grandson, because you have saved us from the hand of Midian.'" This request reflects the people's desire for a strong, centralized leader, signaling the future monarchy of Israel. However, Gideon's response demonstrated his understanding of the true king of Israel. Judges 8:23 records his reply, "But Gideon told them, 'I will not rule over you, nor will my son rule over you. The Lord will rule over you.'" This statement by Gideon was a powerful testament to his faith and his understanding of God's role as the true leader of Israel. He recognized that his victory was not the result of his own strength or talent, but was due to the power of God. However, Gideon's subsequent actions revealed the complexities of his character. Judges 8:24-27 recount an interesting detail. He went on, "I do have one request of you. Each of you give me an earring from your share of the plunder." It was the custom of the Ishmaelites to wear gold earrings. They answered, "We'll be glad to give them." So they spread out a garment, and each of them threw a gold earring from the plunder into it. The weight of the gold earrings he asked for was 1,700 shekels, not counting the ornaments, the purple garments worn by the kings of Midian, or the chains that were on the camels' necks. Gideon made the gold into an ephod, and he placed it in his hometown, in Ophrah. All Israel prostituted themselves by worshiping it there, and it became a snare to Gideon and his family. This detail reveals a major flaw in Gideon's judgment. Although his intention may not have been to create an idol for worship, his actions led to the people engaging in idolatrous worship, distorting true worship of God. Despite this mistake, the immediate impact of Gideon's leadership on Israel was positive. Judges 8:28 tells us, "Thus, Midian was subdued before the Israelites and did not raise its head again during Gideon's lifetime. The land had peace for 40 years." This 40 years of peace was a testament to the effectiveness of Gideon's leadership and the blessing of God on Israel. However, when the people returned to him, the story also reveals that the seeds of future problems had been sown. Judges 8:30-31 tells us, "Gideon had 70 sons of his own, for he had many wives. He also had a concubine in Shechem, who bore him a son, whom he named Abimelech." The description of Gideon's family, particularly his many wives and concubine, shows that he may have adopted practices common among the kings of neighboring nations, rather than acting as a theocratic leader of Israel. The specific mention of Abimelech is significant because he would later play a tragic role in Israel's history. Gideon's death is summarized in Judges 8:32. Gideon, son of Joash, died at a good old age and was buried in the tomb of his father Joash, in Ophrah of the Abiezrite. Tragically, after Gideon's death, the people of Israel quickly turned away. Judges 8:33-35 reports, "No sooner had Gideon died than the Israelites again prostituted themselves to the Baals. They set up Baal-berith as their god, and did not remember the Lord their God, who had rescued them from the hands of all their enemies on every side. They also failed to show kindness to the family of Jerubbaal, that is, Gideon, for all the good things he had done for them." The return to idolatry and the lack of gratitude toward Gideon's family highlights the cyclical nature of Israel's history during the time of the Judges, where periods of faithfulness and blessing were often followed by spiritual decline and chaos. Gideon's story is a powerful testimony to God's ability to use unlikely people to fulfill his purposes. From being called the least in his family to becoming a powerful leader of Israel, Gideon is a testament to how faith and obedience can overcome fear and insecurity. Gideon's life challenges us to trust in God even when the circumstances seem impossible. It reminds us that God can accomplish great things even with few resources when we place our trust in Him. As we reflect on this story, let us ask ourselves, where in our lives might God be calling us to act in faith? What difficult armies are we facing that seem impossible to overcome? How can we, like Gideon, move forward in obedience, not trusting in our own strength, but in the power of God? This also seems to be a reminder that God is still at work transforming ordinary people into extraordinary tools for His will. I hope that, like Gideon, we will respond to God's call with faith and obedience, ready to be used by Him in ways we may have never imagined possible. And surely, you have also noticed that in life, when facing seemingly insurmountable difficulties, it is faith and obedience to God that will help us overcome. Therefore, no matter the circumstances, God always has a good plan for each of our lives, and He will help us overcome every challenge. Have you ever felt like Gideon, standing before great challenges and not knowing what to do? Share with us in the comments below how you overcame those challenges. If Gideon's story has touched your heart, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to our channel to explore many other great lessons from the Bible. Turn on notifications so you never miss any inspiring stories from us. Thank you for following, and we'll see you in the next video. May you always be strong in faith and obedient to God.